My name is Rose J. Fulton. I am 36 years old. I work in finance, and 3 days ago, my engagement ended with a text message that didn't even pretend to care how it landed. Evan texted me in the middle of a workday, no warning, no lead-in, no attempt at conversation. He wrote that he had found someone else, another woman. Then he told me to deal with it. That was the full message. No apology, no explanation, no pause, just a clean dismissal, like he was closing a tab he no longer needed open. I stared at my phone longer than I expected to, not because I was confused, but because I was registering how certain he sounded. The confidence in the message was what struck me first. It wasn't impulsive. It wasn't emotional. It was delivered like a conclusion he assumed I would accept, like he had already moved on and expected me to absorb the impact quietly while everything else stayed the same. I replied with one word, finally. Then I stopped engaging completely. I am not someone who reacts loudly. I don't escalate, I don't beg, I don't argue when something breaks at a structural level. I disengage. Evan and I had been together for 4 years, engaged for 8 months, wedding planned for early summer, venue booked, deposits paid, guest list nearly finalized. From the outside, our life looked orderly and stable. Inside, it was something else entirely, a kind of managed chaos I kept mistaking for confidence. Evan had a sharp personality, direct, cutting. He liked to call it honesty, but over time it revealed itself as impatience. Early on, I told myself that edge was part of the appeal. He was decisive. He knew what he wanted. He didn't soften his words. I admired that, or I thought I did. Over time, that sharpness turned toward me. Small digs disguised as jokes. Comments about how my job was safe but boring. Observations about how his friends' partners were more exciting. Reminders that I should be grateful he chose me. We lived together. I covered most of the expenses: rent, utilities, insurance, groceries, subscriptions, streaming services, phone plans. He contributed when freelance work was good, sporadically, unpredictably. I didn't love that arrangement, but I accepted it because I believed we were building toward marriage, toward something shared, toward permanence, or so I thought. When the message came, what surprised me wasn't the betrayal. Looking back, the signs were there. The late nights, the emotional distance, the way he spoke about other women like they were theoretical upgrades. What surprised me was the tone, casual, almost smug, like he expected me to react emotionally, to cry, to argue, to ask why, to fight for him. I did none of that. I didn't follow up, I didn't call, I didn't demand an explanation. Instead, I spent the rest of that afternoon doing something Evan clearly hadn't considered. I logged into every account I funded and began turning them off one by one, quietly, methodically, without announcement, without threat. I treated it like an administrative task that had been overdue. The joint checking account was first. I rerouted my paycheck before the end of the business day and reduced my contribution to the exact amount that was legally mine. I left enough to cover anything already pending. I am not reckless. I am precise. Then came the subscriptions. Phone plan canceled on my end and ported to a new number I controlled. His phone stayed active for about 6 hours before service dropped. Streaming services logged out everywhere. Cloud storage downgraded. The gym membership I paid for froze automatically when the card declined. Next was the car insurance. The policy was in my name. He was a listed driver. I removed him. Same with roadside assistance. Same with the credit card he used for emergencies that I paid off every month. I changed passwords on everything tied to my identity. Banking, email, utilities. I did not lock him out of the apartment. That would have created unnecessary legal noise. I packed a bag and stayed with a friend while I figured out my next step. That night, Evan texted me again. The tone had changed. Confused. Irritated. He asked why his phone wasn't working and why the grocery order wouldn't go through. He added that my behavior was immature and petty. I didn't respond. The next day, he escalated. Calls from unknown numbers, emails accusing me of financial abuse, messages swinging between insults and attempts at reason. He told me I was overreacting. He told me couples get through worse. He told me I was proving his point about my insecurity. I said nothing. On the third day, I started getting calls from a number with a local area code I didn't recognize. The voicemails were formal, professional, asking me to call back regarding an urgent matter. That's when I realized Evan had changed strategies. He had contacted a lawyer. The voicemail from the lawyer was calm in a way that immediately told me he had only heard one version of the story. He said he represented Evan in a domestic financial dispute and wanted to discuss urgent concerns about shared assets and the abrupt withdrawal of support. The wording mattered. Shared assets, support. Those were not accidental choices. They were assumptions framed as facts, meant to establish leverage before I ever spoke. I listened once, saved the message, and waited until the end of the day before calling back. Not because I was unsure, but because I wanted my response to be clean. When I returned the call, I kept my voice neutral. I told him Evan and I were not married. I told him there was no joint lease. I told him there was no prenuptial agreement and no written expectation of ongoing financial support. I told him every account I closed was in my name and funded solely by me. Then I asked him, very directly, to clarify what legal basis he believed existed for his call. There was a pause, not dramatic, calculating. He asked if I would be willing to meet to resolve things amicably. I said I was willing to communicate in writing only. He said his client felt blindsided and destabilized. I said his client had sent me a message, ending our engagement and announcing a new relationship without discussion. I said my response was to disengage financially and personally. I asked again where the legal issue was. He did not answer directly. That afternoon, Evan sent me a long email. No insults this time, no bravado. The tone was careful, almost rehearsed. He reframed everything. He said he never meant it that way. He said he was emotional. He said I knew he didn't mean deal with it literally. He said he assumed we would talk. He said my reaction was extreme and vindictive. Then he listed expenses he believed I was responsible for covering until he got back on his feet. Rent, utilities, phone, groceries, therapy. He used the phrase transitional support. Reading that was the moment something clicked cleanly into place. This was not about heartbreak. This was about entitlement. I replied once, briefly. I said the engagement was over. I said there would be no further financial support. I said all communications should go through his lawyer. Then I blocked his number again. Within an hour, the lawyer called back. His tone had changed, careful instead of confident. He asked if I had time to talk now. I said no and asked him to email his concerns. He did anyway a few minutes later. The email was shorter than I expected. No demands this time, just questions, clarifying questions about the lease, about the accounts, about whether I had ever promised continued support in writing, about whether any of the wedding expenses were refundable. That shift told me everything. He had looked at the situation and realized this was not leverage. This was noise. Around the same time, I heard directly from Evan again. He used a friend's phone to message me on social media before I blocked that too. The tone swung back to aggressive. He accused me of trying to ruin his life. He said I was punishing him for being honest. He said real women don't abandon men when things get hard. I didn't respond, but I did take screenshots. I have learned that when someone starts rewriting history, you document quietly. That evening, I went back to the apartment while he was out. I took only what was mine: clothes, documents, electronics. I photographed every room before I left. Clean, undamaged, exactly as it should be. I left my key on the counter. No note, no message, no final word. The next morning, his lawyer emailed again. This time he said his client wanted to explore mediation rather than escalation. That phrase made me laugh for the first time in days. There was nothing to mediate. There was no shared future to negotiate. I replied in writing. I reiterated that the engagement was terminated by Evan's message. I stated that no marriage occurred. I stated that no joint assets existed. I stated that I would not be participating in mediation, and that any further contact should be limited to written communication regarding property retrieval if needed. 2 hours later, Evan lost it. He sent a final email from his own account before I blocked that too. It was long, bitter, accusatory. He told me I was heartless. He told me the new woman would never treat him this way. He told me he expected better from someone who claimed to love him. What he didn't realize was that the moment he said he had found someone else and told me to deal with it, he stopped being my responsibility. The first bill he actually noticed was the rent reminder. Not an eviction notice, just the automated email asking for confirmation of payment. He forwarded it to me with a message asking what I was doing. I did nothing. The second hit was his car. He called a mutual friend in a panic because the insurance app wouldn't load and roadside assistance said he wasn't covered. He had assumed coverage was just something that existed, like air. He didn't realize it was something I maintained. By the end of that day, the tone shifted from anger to fear. He emailed his lawyer again, asking what his options were. The lawyer responded by asking for documents he didn't have. Lease agreements, shared account statements, written promises. There were none. The other woman disappeared quietly. I only know because Evan accused me of poisoning her against him in one of the last messages that slipped through before I blocked everything. I had never spoken to her. She just met the version of him that had no financial safety net and decided it wasn't her problem. The lawyer tried once more, this time with a different angle. The email was polite, almost apologetic, asking whether I would consider temporary assistance to avoid hardship while Evan adjusted. Temporary assistance. The language was soft, but the intent was the same. I replied with a single sentence. There is no legal or moral obligation for continued support after termination initiated by your client. That was the end of the calls. A week later, I heard through someone else that Evan was moving out. Not upgrading, downsizing, crashing with a friend while he figured things out, selling items he once mocked me for being frugal about. The irony wasn't lost on me. I canceled the wedding officially that afternoon. Lost deposits, took the hit, clean break, worth every dollar. I didn't feel victorious. I felt calm, clear. The kind of calm that comes when you stop arguing with reality and start aligning with it. What Evan tried next was public pressure. I woke up to messages from people I barely spoke to anymore. His cousin, an old co-worker of his, one mutual friend who suddenly wanted to check in and understand both sides. That phrase is always a tell. It never means neutrality. It means someone has been given a version that requires reinforcement. Evan posted vague things online about abandonment and betrayal. Nothing with my name attached, just enough for people who knew us to connect dots. Quotes about strong men being punished for honesty, posts about rebuilding after emotional abuse, stories about being discarded when he was vulnerable. I didn't react. I didn't comment. I didn't defend myself. Silence does more damage to that strategy than any argument ever could. Then he escalated again. This time he emailed my parents, not to insult me, not to accuse, to appeal. He wrote about how much he loved me, how confused he was, how he never meant for things to end like this, how he hoped they could talk sense into me. My mother forwarded the email to me with one line asking if I was okay. I told her yes and explained everything plainly. No emotion, just facts. She replied that she was proud of me for standing firm and that my father would have said the same thing. That door closed quietly. The final attempt came dressed in legal language but hollow underneath. A letter drafted by his lawyer but clearly driven by panic. It outlined emotional reliance and implied expectations without making actual claims. It asked again for discussion. I didn't respond. 2 days later, the lawyer sent one last email. Short, neutral. He said his client would not be pursuing the matter further and requested confirmation of item pickup times. That was it. No apology, no acknowledgement, just retreat. After that, the noise stopped completely. No more posts, no more messages, no more indirect contact. The silence felt different this time. Not tense, final. Once the noise stopped, I noticed how quiet my own head felt. Not empty, organized. Like a room after you finally throw out things you kept tripping over. The first change was practical. My expenses dropped immediately. I was spending less without trying. No constant small drains, no surprise charges, no background stress about whether work was good for him this month. My accounts stabilized in a way I hadn't realized they were missing. The second change was emotional, but not dramatic. I didn't spiral. I didn't miss him the way I thought I would. What I missed was the version of the future I had already outgrown. Once that was gone, there was nothing left to argue with. Friends asked how I was holding up. I told them the truth. I was relieved. Not because the relationship ended, but because it ended cleanly. No prolonged bargaining, no drawn-out collapse, just a clear line and forward motion. I replayed the moment of his text more than anything else. Not with anger, with clarity. That message wasn't impulsive, it was confident. Evan believed he had leverage. He believed I would absorb the shock and keep providing stability while he explored options. When that assumption failed, everything else unraveled. That realization mattered. It told me this wasn't a single bad decision. It was a worldview. I also learned something uncomfortable about myself during that quiet stretch. I am not reactive. I am responsive. When something breaks trust at a structural level, I do not negotiate with it. I removed myself from the load-bearing position and let it stand or fall on its own. Evan told people I was cold. I didn't correct him. Cold implies distance. What I felt was alignment. The apartment was gone not long after. I moved into a smaller place closer to work. Nothing dramatic, no upgrade, just quieter, cleaner, mine. I slept better almost immediately. I woke up without the low-grade tension I had been carrying for so long that I thought it was normal. Silence, it turns out, can be restorative when it isn't filled with anticipation or dread. A little over a week after everything went quiet, Evan tried one last time to reach me directly. Not through lawyers, not through friends. He showed up in person. I was coming back from work when I saw a car parked down the block from my new place. Not even his car, a borrowed one. He stepped out when he saw me, timing it like coincidence, like he hadn't planned it. He started walking toward me before I could say anything, talking fast, saying he just wanted 5 minutes, that he deserved at least that. I told him no. The word landed harder than anything else I had said since this began. He laughed once, sharp and short, like I was joking. Then his face changed. Frustration replaced confidence. He said I was being cruel. He said we were engaged, and that meant something. He said I owed him a conversation. I told him the conversation ended when he sent the text. He tried to pivot. Said he had been angry. Said he didn't expect me to actually walk away. Said he thought my reply was sarcasm. That line mattered. It was the most honest thing he said. He admitted he assumed I would calm down and we would talk it out. He asked if we could start over slowly. No pressure, just talk. Just see where things went. He said the other woman was a mistake. He said he realized what he lost. I told him I wasn't angry, and that was why the answer was no. I said trust doesn't reset because circumstances change. I said I was no longer available for reinterpretations of reality. He called me heartless again. Said I was punishing him. I told him consequences are not punishment. They are alignment. I walked past him and went inside. I didn't slam the door. I didn't look back. Later that night, he texted me from a new number. Just one line. He said he never thought I would actually leave. That was the point. Watching someone collide with the outcome of their own assumptions is strange. When you are no longer emotionally invested, it becomes observational instead of painful. Evan had assumed security without commitment, support without accountability, presence without respect. When those things vanished, he didn't see it as cause and effect. He saw it as betrayal. That told me everything about how he moved through the world. Through mutual friends, I heard fragments of how Evan explained what happened. He told people I changed overnight, that I blindsided him, that I was controlling with money. The narrative didn't bother me because it required my participation to survive. I wasn't participating. What stood out most was how quickly he reframed himself as the victim of unpredictability. He never acknowledged the text. He never repeated the exact words he used. I found someone else deal with it, became I was honest, and she overreacted. That gap between action and story is where trust dies permanently. I learned how much peace comes from decisive boundaries. Not threats, not ultimatums, just clean exits. People who benefit from your flexibility will always call boundaries cruelty. There was no dramatic closure moment, no apology that would have changed anything, just a gradual realization on his side that there was no angle left, no leverage, no emotional hook. That's when the attempt stopped completely. I don't hate Evan. Hate would imply unfinished business. What I feel is distance and clarity. He wasn't a villain. He was a lesson I paid for early instead of late. Where I am now is simple. I am single. I am stable. I am not confused about what happened or why it ended. That matters more than being comfortable. The wedding money is gone. Deposits lost. I accepted that immediately. Money recovers faster than trust ever does. I consider it tuition. I paid to learn something before it cost me years instead of weeks. I changed my routines, focused on work, reconnected with friends I had drifted from while trying to maintain balance for two people. I didn't rush into anything new. I didn't need to replace what I removed. The space itself was the reward. Evan hasn't contacted me again. Not directly, not indirectly. The silence stuck this time because there is nothing left to test. No soft boundary, no emotional backdoor, just absence. That is the cleanest ending I've ever had. If you're listening to this and thinking walking away like this sounds harsh, let me be clear. What ended the relationship wasn't my response. It was his certainty that he could discard me without consequence and still keep the benefits. I didn't punish him. I stopped subsidizing disrespect. Love without respect turns into obligation. Obligation without choice turns into resentment. I refuse to live in that middle space. The aftertaste of all this isn't bitterness, it's clarity. I now know that when someone tells you exactly how little they value your presence, you should believe them the first time and respond accordingly. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't argue. I didn't beg. I aligned my actions with reality and stepped out of the way. And that was enough.